أول الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم buyuruyor hadis-i şerifte. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من سركم أن تقبل صلاتكم فلأمكم خياركم. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki şayet namazın kabul edilmesini sizi sevdirecekse hayırlı olanınızı imamlık yapın.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says or asks, do you like to be happy that your prayer is accepted? Then make the one who is going to lead the prayer, make the imam to be the one who is most virtuous among you.
İmamınız yapın yani. Yani en iyi insanı imam olarak koyun ki Allah sizin namazınızı kabul eder.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, instructs us that when choosing the one who should be imam and lead the prayer, that we should choose the one who is the most virtuous among us. And if the one most virtuous among us leads the prayer, Allah Almighty will accept and will be pleased with that prayer.
And قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن سركم أن تقبل صلاتكم فليؤمكم علماءكم فإنما وفتكم فيما بينكم وبين ربكم. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem gene buyuruyor ki şayet namazınız kabul edilmesini sizi sevindirecekse alim olanlarınız size imamlık etsin diyor.
And our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says, if you are happy for your prayer to be accepted by Allah Almighty, then when you choose your imam, make sure that the one who leads the prayer is the one who is the most knowledgeable among you.
Çünkü alimleriniz Rabbiniz için aranızdaki elçilerinizdir.
The knowledgeable among you, the scholars among you, our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says, are the messengers between you and your Lord.
Yani hayırlı insanlar, ilim sahibi, takva sahibi olanlar imam olsun ki
our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, instructs us with this, that the one who is going to be the imam should be the one who is the most virtuous, the most knowledgeable, and the most beneficial within the community.
Sizi hem siz sevinirsiniz, Allah katında da makbul olur.
And if the one who is the most virtuous, the most knowledgeable, and the most beneficial among you leads the prayer, then not only you will be happy, but also your prayer will be acceptable in the divine presence.
Allah Azze ve Celle'nin huzurunda makbul namaz olur.
A prayer performed by such an imam is a prayer which is liked by Allah Almighty in the divine presence and which is considered to be acceptable in divine presence.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أيما إماما سهى فصلى بالقوم وهو جنب فقد مضت صلاتكم ثم ليغتسل ثم هو ليعيد صلاته ويصلي بغير وضوء فمثل ذلك. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki herhangi bir imam sehven cünüp olarak bir topluluğa namaz kıldırırsa sonra cünüp olduğunu hatırlarsa o namaz artık geçmiştir. Yani cemaat için caizdir.
If someone leads the prayer in congregation, but without actually noticing or forgetting, that imam is in a state of impurity and requires a full body ablution, if that person is in a state of being junub and requires ghusl, then that prayer, if it has already been performed and the imam did not notice or forget about it, then that prayer is over and it is acceptable for the community who stood behind the imam.
Ancak imam gusleder ve sadece kendisi namazını iade eder.
However, the imam who forgot about being in a state of impurity, he must of course make a full body ablution and he must redo his prayer.
Abdestini namaz kıldırdığı zaman da durum aynıdır.
And this also applies to a situation when the imam forgets or did not notice that he does not have ablution. He forgot that he had to take ablution or to renew ablution and leads the prayer. Then that prayer is complete for the congregation, for the jama'ah. But the moment the imam notices this, he must of course do his ablution and redo his prayer.
Yani o cemaatin namazı makbuldur. İmamınki makbul değil. Onu kendisi iade eder.
The prayer that is performed by the Jama'ah is accepted. However, the Imam who forgot about not being in a state of purity must redo his prayer.
Yani şimdi onun için yani namaz imamın arkasında kıldın mı o başını düşünme nasıl kıldı nasıl yaptı.
Therefore, when you perform your prayer in Jama'ah and there's someone leading the prayer, there's the Imam, then you should trust and you should not have worries or doubts or any anxieties or any thoughts about the validity.
Çünkü bazen bilerek bilmeyerek senin niyet makbuldur. Sen cemaatle durmuşsun imamın arkasında abdest namazın her şey yerinde o imamın kendi kıldığı namaz makbul olur.
As the Jama'ah, you are not held accountable about the Imam forgetting about his ablution. You went to the prayer, you have taken your proper ablution, you stand there, you make the intention, Allah Almighty then looks at your intention, and you want to perform the prayer in Jama'ah in order to gain Allah Almighty's rewards. That is all that counts. So your prayer is valid and it is accepted. It is not affected by the fact that the Imam may have forgotten that he has to redo his ablution.
Sehven olduğu tabi olursa, sehv olmazsa o vakit durum değişir.
Of course, all this only applies that the Imam thought that he had his ablution. If he on purpose wants to lead the prayer without ablution, then the situation is completely different. What is mentioned here is about the situation that the Imam thought that he was in a state of purity, he thought he had his ablution, but forgot about it.
Ama sehv olarak yani bilmeden unutmuş olarak imam kendisi abdestini alır, guslunu yapar, namazını kılar. İmam cemaate gerekmez o şey.
So if the Imam realized later on that he actually had to redo his ablution and that he was in a state of impurity, then he must make his ablution and redo his prayer. Nevertheless, the prayer of the congregation is accepted and valid.
قال الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم أيما رجل أما قوما وهم له كارهون لم تجز صلاته أذنيه. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki kendisini istemeyen bir topluluğa imamlık eden kişinin namazı kulaklarının ötesine geçmez.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that if someone enforces himself to lead the prayer and then if someone forces to be the Imam, then that prayer will not go beyond the ears.
Yani istenmeyen, sevilmeyen bir imam zorla imamlık yaparsa insanlara orada onun namazı ancak kulaklarına kadar gelir.
If someone forces himself to be the Imam and pressures himself into be the Imam in front of a Jama'ah who actually does not want him to be Imam, then that prayer will not go beyond the ears. Our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, says.
Tabii öteki cemaati makbul ama onun da şüpheli olur.
So if such a person leads the prayer, if such a person who leads the prayer by force, for the Jama'ah, their prayer will be valid and accepted. However, this does not apply to the one who forces himself to be the Imam and he makes himself to be the Imam by force.
Diğer salih amelin affedildiği yere yükseltilmez. Yani makbuldur ama o seviyeye gelmez.
And that prayer may still be accepted. However, that prayer by an Imam who by force led the prayer of that Imam will not rise to high stations.
قال الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم الإمام ضامن والمؤذن مؤتمن اللهم أرشد الأئمة وأغفر للمؤذنين. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem diyor ki imam sorumluluk yüklenen kişidir.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, describes the Imam as a person who carries and shoulders responsibility.
Yani imam oldu mu o sorumludur. O cemaatinden sorumludur.
If someone becomes the imam to lead the prayer, then that person, imam, carries the responsibility of his jamaat.
Müezzin ise güvenilen kişidir. Müezzin de güvenilir. Çünkü onun
And our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, describes the muezzin as a person who is trustworthy.
ezan vakti o kendi bakacak. Eskiden zaten bu takvim falan yoktu. Müezzin güneşe göre, vakte göre kendi ezanını okurdu. İnsanlar da ona göre namazlarını kılar, oruçlarını tutar, oruçlarını açarlar. Onun o temendir yani.
And our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, describes a muezzin to be a person who is trustworthy, who must be and characterized as a muezzin as a trustworthy person. Because in former times especially, it was the muezzin who would determine the time to pray by observing the sun, by observing the moon, and depending on the different phases of the day, he would then recite the adhan, thus determining the time when to perform the prayer, determining the time when to start fasting, determining the time when to break one's fast. So the muezzin had to be a person who was trustworthy. And in former times they did not have such things such as clocks or calendars in order to know the time. They all depended on the adhan of the muezzin and on the decision of the muezzin.
Emin olması lazım. Dua ediyor. Allah'ım imamları doğru yoldan ayırma.
And thereupon our beloved, when describing, as our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, describe the characteristics of an imam and of a muezzin, our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, then continued to make a supplication dedicated to the imams, for the imams, praying to Allah Almighty, "Oh my Lord, Allah Almighty, don't make the imams go astray from the right way,
Müezzinleri de bağışla.
and forgive the muezzins." Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, supplicated to Allah Almighty.
قال الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم الإمام ضامن فإن أحسن فله ولهم وإن أساء فعليه ولا عليهم. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki imam sorumluluk yüklenen kişidir.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, continues to describe that the imam is someone who shoulders responsibility.
İmam namazı güzel kıldırırsa bu kendisi ve cemaat için sevaptır.
And when the imam leads the prayer in a beautiful manner, then that prayer will be rewarded to him as well as to the Jama'ah.
Yani imamın emaneti büyüktür, sorumluluğu büyüktür.
Therefore, the imam has great responsibilities in leading the prayer.
O namazı güzel kıldırırsa hem kendisi için hem cemaat için sevap kazanmış olur.
And when the imam leads the prayer in a beautiful manner, then he, as the imam, will be receiving rewards, and so will the Jama'ah do.
Eğer kötü kıldırırsa ya naksan bir şey tam olursa vebali sadece kendine aittir.
However, if the imam does not lead the prayer in a beautiful manner, if the imam leads the prayer in an improper manner or in an inadequate manner, in that case, only the imam will be held responsible for his own inadequacies.
Kendisine aittir. Yani cemaat ile bir vebal yoktur.
So the Jama'ah will not be responsible for the improper prayer led by the imam.
Cemaate vebal yoktur. Çünkü bu cemaat imamın arkasında duruyorlar. Niyetleri Allah rızası için namaz kılmak ve cemaatle sevap kazanmak.
Because the Jama'ah, they have no option. They came and to perform the prayer in Jama'ah, they stood there and they made good intentions to perform their prayer in order to gain the rewards. But Allah Almighty promised to those who perform their prayer in Jama'ah,
onların sevapları mahfuzdur.
and they will receive the rewards and the Jama'ah will receive their rewards according to their intentions.
Ama imamın ki olmaz.
However, the imam, he has the responsibility that if he does not lead the prayer in a proper manner, then he will be held accountable.
Kendisinin vebalı olmuş olur. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاثة لا تجوز صلاتهم لا تجاب صلاتهم آذانهم العبد الآبق حتى يرجع وامرأة باتت وزوجها عليها ساخط وإمام قوم وهم له كارهون. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki 3 kişi vardır ki namazları kulaklarının ötesine gitmez.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that there are three types of people whose prayers will not go beyond their ears.
Yani geçmez. Bunlardan biri geri dönünceye kadar firar eden köle.
The first type of people whose prayers will not go beyond their ears are the slaves who run away without actually being freed.
Yani eskiden köle olduğu vakit firar etmesi caiz değildi.
In former times, when there used to be slaves, it was not permissible for them to run away without being freed.
Azad olacak ya kendinin şeyini ödeyecek de azad olsun.
A slave needed to be either freed by a third person, or they needed to pay for their own freedom.
Bırakıp da kaçarsa o da olmuyor, onun namazı caiz olmuyor.
But if a slave ran away without being freed, then the prayer of that slave would not be valid.
Bir geceyi kocası kendisine öfkeli olarak geçiren kadın, yani kavga edip kocasına, onda namazı doğru olmaz.
And also the prayer of a woman who spent the night with her husband and made her husband in that night angry and upset and quarreled and fought with her husband, that woman's prayer is also not valid.
Diğeri de istemediği toplulukta olarak imamlık eden kişidir.
And third, the prayer of a person who by force led the prayer in congregation and made himself to be the imam by force is also not valid.
Yani istemez gelip zorla imamlık yapar, onun da namazı makbul olmuyor.
If someone makes himself to be imam by force, then that imam's prayer is also not acceptable.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاثة لا ترفع صلاتهم فوق رؤوسهم شبرا رجل أما قوما وهم له كارهون وامرأة باتت وزوجها عليها ساخط وإخوان متصارمان. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki 3 kişi vardır ki namazları başlarından yukarı bir karış yükselmez.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says there are 3 types of people whose prayers do not go an inch above their heads.
Yani kabul olmaz hükümlerinden, yani tam olmaz.
And in other words, their prayers are not accepted, or their prayers are not proper.
Biri istemediği toplulukta imam eden kişi.
The prayer of an imam, of a person who made himself to be imam by force and led the prayer by force in a community who did not want that person to be imam, that person's prayer is not accepted.
İstemiyor, kalkıp da ben zorla yaparım diye geçiyor, cemaate mecburen onu uyuyor, onun namazı makbul değildir.
If the Jama does not want that person to be the imam, but if that person insists on being the imam and by force makes himself to be the imam, then the prayer of that imam is not acceptable.
Geceyi kocası kendisine öfkeli olarak geçiren kadın,
and the prayer of the woman who spent the night quarreling, fighting and upsetting her husband is also not acceptable.
Birbirine düşman kesilen 2 Müslüman.
And also the prayer of 2 Muslims who fight each other and who offend each other and have a fallout with each other.
Kardeştir. Yani 2 Müslüman kardeş olmaz, küslü olur.
If Muslim brothers and sisters cannot have a fallout with each other, they cannot argue, they cannot be in a state of fighting each other and being in a state of being offended. If they are in such a state of having a fallout with each other, if they have hurt and offended each other, then their prayer is not acceptable.
Sadaka Resulullah fîmâ kâle zâne ve şerefin Nebi sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem. Ashab-ı kiram وإلى أرواح مشايخنا آبائنا وأمهاتنا خاصة إلى روح مولانا شيخ الله فازع شيخ محمد ناظم حقاني شيخ مولانا شيخ الله فازع شيخ محمد ناظم حقاني وسائر ساداتنا الصديقين ومن أحد هذا الرجال والحسين في الأفضل من رفقائه جميع الناس مشترك الله لجنة الشهداء الله لجنة الفاتحة.